Welcome to AXREM Insights, developing healthcare through medtech and innovation. Join Melanie Johnson and Sully Edgington as they talk with our industry leaders and experts.
Hello, I'm Melanie Johnson and I'm here with Sally Edgington. Welcome to episode 4 of our Collaborations podcasts. Today we have the pleasure to be speaking to both Andrew New, Chief Executive Officer, and Richard Evans, Executive Commercial Director at NHS Supply Chain. Welcome Andrew and Richard, and thank you for being on the show and allowing us to get to know you a little better. With our podcast theme being collaborations, I will start by handing over to you, Andrew, to tell us a little bit about yourself.
No, thank you very much. So Andrew New, I'm the Chief Executive of the NHS Supply Chain. I've been in the organisation now for just over 3 years. And I was asked to join kind of as part of the post-COVID recovery activity and start thinking about what we wanted the NHS supply chain to be in the future and how we can ensure we unlock all the different opportunities and the potential in our teams to do the best thing for the NHS, for our clinical colleagues and for patient care. I've had a fantastic 3 years in the organisation. I'm looking forward to talk about some things we've done, but also some things we're going to do in the future.
Excellent, thank you. And now over to you, Richard.
Thank you, Melanie. Yes, Richard Evans. I'm the Executive Commercial Director and I've been at Supply Chain for 1 week shy of 6 months. So I joined with the Standardisation and Simplification Challenge to bring together the Commercial Directorate from the previous towers that they resided in and make things ultimately simpler and more standard for my colleagues, but also in terms of for the whole system. I'm a commercial procurement professional and have been doing it for 25 years, which makes me feel incredibly old.
Thanks, Richard. And I've been with AXREM now for 5.5 years, and I've seen so many changes in NHS supply chain over that period, but especially the last couple of years. Can you run our listeners through these and what the impact will be for the NHS and the industry and the changes that you've recently made?
Yeah, probably best if I start with that one. So we made some choices at the end of 2021 when we sat as a team and said, well, what should the NHS supply chain be here for and what should it be doing? We agreed as a leadership team, as an executive team and with our stakeholders that actually our job is to be brilliant in the procurement space, to manage that commercial stuff really well, to be exceptionally efficient and effective in the way we manage our supply chains and ensure deliveries of all the things we're responsible for into the NHS. We should have fantastic data to drive great decision making. We should do it with a focus on being as easy to work with as possible from our suppliers, from our various stakeholders and from trusts and colleagues and working across the NHS. And we should do it all in the interests of the healthcare system, in the interest of patients, in the interest of our clinical colleagues, to try and make their lives as positive as they possibly can be. So we said, on that basis, what needs to be different? And we looked at the way the model worked and have been hugely successful since 2018 when the future operating model stood up, the now version of the NHS supply chain. We said, what needs to be different? One of the things we recognised was that our commercial teams, although done a brilliant job individually, had been very different in their approaches. And if you were a supplier who provided medical devices and clinical consumables and diagnostic equipment and some services, all of those contracts have started to look really different. The tender processes have started to look really different. The articulation of what was important to the NHS had started to become very different. And we recognised to be really easy to work with, we had to drive consistency. We had a choice. Do we put greater standards and control over the third parties doing our procurement work for us, or do we bring those teams together and create a commercial director within our organisation? And now the director that Richard's joined us to lead. Over the next year, we transferred in over 500 colleagues who had worked previously for our commercial partners, now into our teams. And we've now stood up a centralised category management organisation responsible for diagnostic equipment, but also implantables and consumables. We still work with some experts across the provision of food and hotel services and stationary things into the NHS where they're not core medical clinical things. But again, working with those new partners to ensure more consistency in the approach. So we've hugely changed where the responsibility sits in the NHS supply chain for decision making. We've created the platform to simplify the way that we work. And one of the things I asked Richard to do when he joined the organisation was to focus on how can we create those fantastically high quality standards and expectations, but delivered in a simple and consistent way across all of those categories are responsible. There's 136 unique sets of goods and services that we're responsible for, and we have to do them in a consistent, high standard way. Alongside the commercial staff, we've also had to make some choices around our physical logistics delivery service. That contract was naturally coming to its end, been to market to secure a successor to the current arrangements, and over the next month or so, we'll be in a position to announce the outcome from that tender process. That will be a big start of our transformation in the logistics flow and the products and how they get to care settings. And that will start to expand that conversation, not just into acute hospitals, but also in community space, as we get to transition care more broadly from acute settings into the community. And we'll start to put the consistent modernisation of technology and infrastructure at the heart of what we do in our supply chain proposition. Again, going from very much analog view of the world to a digital view of the world in the future. Finally, we have done the same across our technology partners. Historically, we've had an outsourced arrangement where all activities have been undertaken by one provider. We've made some choices again on how that needs to be rebalanced. How much understanding, insight, knowledge, and experience we need to have to provide proper assurance over the activities of our partners, and then where we want them to lead, when we want them to design, take risks, and deliver projects that will improve our services to the NHS. So in all of the bits of our organisation, the commercial piece, the supply chain piece, the technology piece, and that layer in between that manages and coordinates all of those together, and we've had to materially change what we do to do the things the NHS needs us to do in the future. Successes of the past are fantastic. Being successful in the future needs us to be different, and being different is what we're really focused on doing.
Thanks, Andrew. And just to come back on a few points there, I have to say from an AXREM perspective, we've always had really positive engagement with NHS Supply Chain, and I've only seen that that's actually got better over the last few years, with many of your colleagues regularly attending some of our special focus group meetings, and we've done quite a few joint projects together looking at standardisation of certain processes and procedures. I think that the feedback from members is that it is getting easier to work with NHS Supply Chain, and I love some of the wording there around consistency, standardisation and simplifying processes, because the biggest thing that I hear from industry is that lack of consistency around the NHS. And obviously when a supplier is dealing with multiple trusts and things are done slightly differently across those trusts, it just adds so much duplication and extra time and effort, I suppose, into the process, which ultimately can add cost into supply chain. So it's really good to see that there is a real focus around that from an industry perspective.
And the closer we get to our colleagues working in trusts and in ICSEs to better articulate to the suppliers the fundamental needs of the NHS, the simpler it will become. So our job is to partner expertly with trust to consolidate that need and then articulate it really simply in our relationship with the supplier base. And it's a skill that's a different one than we've had before, but it's one that as we get better and better at, it should give a higher performing system as a whole, which should enable suppliers to respond to the needs of the healthcare system quicker, more efficiently, more effectively, and give patients a better outcome. So all of this is designed to improve the way the system works as a whole, not just improve the way that the supply chain works in its own right.
Thank you for that. So we've obviously heard you speaking about aligning NHS supply chain with NHS priorities. Can you give some examples of how you've done this so far, or what you plan to do, aside obviously from what you've mentioned already?
Yeah, I think so. If I've touched on the first half, I think probably hand over to Richard to think about some of the more value-based things we're trying to do. I think I start with this around need. It's our job to design solutions that fulfill the needs of the NHS as it delivers exceptional patient care. If you go back 5 or 6 years, the needs as we articulated were really about finding cost as the primary driver. And over time, we've expanded those to say, actually, we need to get a rebalancing between labour standards in the supply chain around sustainability, both in terms of the ability to deliver on products, but also on having the impact on the environment and wherever that manufacturer might take place. And we're moving more into how do we describe the impact of a product on the care system? And it's really important to ensure we get the balance right between all of those initiatives. I've talked already about a little bit of the analog to digital that we're doing as an organisation. It's really important to enable that in the NHS as well. Yeah, we recognise we have a role to articulate to colleagues working in care settings what new technologies might look like, what innovation might look like, how to access it faster, and then how to scale it quicker across the NHS.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's an interesting one because whilst we have created the organisation structure for a commercial department, and in some ways that is a transformation, but actually bringing all those things Andrew said around sustainability and resilience and embedding those in everything we do is a transformation in itself. Alongside the standardisation and the simplification piece, actually my job is a people change job. Right? The processes and those things Andrew said are inherently what we should be doing. How do we get people to do that every day? It's a people change. And as everybody in any kind of industry knows, change is the hard thing to do. You can rewrite a process, you can give people new license to do things, but actually if you don't look at the mindset and the behaviours piece, you can't do that. So I am heavily focused on that change right now. Yes, we have to have the tools in the background, but we have to do that. And that's what delivers the value. It's not just having a new process or just saying we should focus on sustainability. It's actually embedding it, beginning it to be a way of working and how we do things around here. Because that's what clinicians, that's what patients, that's what the whole system expects of us. So we very much need to do that. And yeah, it's a sizable team that have all come from very different backgrounds. We've got a volume of new people in the organisation, which is great to have because we've got new thinking, both people returning to supply chain who have been here before, returning to the NHS because they've been in the NHS before, but also external from lots of different businesses. And having spent my time just prior to coming here in consultancy running transformations, it's great to now have all that knowledge to help knit together the requirements of all the different stakeholders in the system to go, right, how is it that we need to behave and operate to deliver that value?
I think it comes to the way the system works as well. I think our relationships now with the Department of Health, with the MedTech team, with NICE, with the MHRA, with Trust and ICSs, with NHS England is closer than it ever has been before. And I think our ability to coordinate topics collectively and ensure the commercial arm is aligned to the strategic arm and the technical arm is aligned, to make sure these things work together is really, really important. One of the things that Rich team's done a fantastic job over the last year is clearly we've consolidated and have visibility of the provision of a huge amount of the diagnostic equipment that's gone into the NHS over the last 10 years. And actually we're in a fantastic position to give the NHS a list of all of those pieces of equipment and those that are likely coming to the end of their natural life and might need to think about replacement. So we're using our data to feed insights into the decision makers at ICSs around how should you prioritise need. And if you've got funding available in the future, where may it best be spent? If you add that into some of the new knowledge we've got about productivity of the equipment, managing throughput, managing capacity constraints, where could the biggest bang for your buck be by replacing a specific aged asset with a replacement asset without needing to grow your physical infrastructure, but to give your patients a better experience and make it easier for your clinical colleagues to do their job every day? It's about using those insights we've got through fantastic data to drive the performance of the system as a whole. And it's about being a partner in it, not a supplier to it. Right? And that's a big thing we've tried to change over the last 3 years. And it's something that will make the biggest difference in the next 3 years.
Absolutely. And I think some of what you've said kind of aligns with AXREM strategic priorities, but also Lord Darcy's report where he talks about patient safety and reducing excess deaths, role of technology in improving outcomes, future healthcare delivery and aligning with NHS priorities. And it sounds like it is all quite aligned. And that's absolutely what we want to see is more alignment. And you touched on the sustainability piece as well, which is fantastic, all the different work that's being done. And last week we saw the release of the Department of Health and Social Care's Design for Life roadmap, which we welcome. My only concern with all of this is that we've got the NHS team with the roadmap to net zero. Obviously, your colleague Heidi heads up sustainability and supply chain and is doing work there. And I just want to make sure that all these projects align, because again, that's just something where if everyone's doing this fantastic job, but it doesn't quite align, that's where it can cause the pinch points for industry.
The one thing that struck me since coming in is the alignment, if you like, of the whole health vertical with the government. We've got to get that right. But on sustainability, again, you picked on one of my pet topics. There's a lot of talking, right? Again, I was privileged to be involved a lot in the Scope 3 benchmark that exists out there before I joined. And what I observed in that is there's a lot of talking, not a lot of doing. So one thing I have seen since I've come in here, obviously with the evergreen stuff that NHSE does, etc., there is actually action going on. So we should actually, as a system, be really proud of that. But it's aligning it and then taking it to the next level. All right, we've got that piece. Now where do we go? And I spent the last 2 weeks meeting with suppliers. And actually, a lot of those conversations have been around sustainability and hearing what they're doing and making sure we're benefiting and the whole system is benefiting from that. So you're right. It's absolutely, it's not just about alignment. It's and start the doing.
We go on the challenge. And this is one of the things that AXREM does actually bring to us. And as we engage in these conversations, if there are times when we haven't quite got it right and the department is slightly not aligned to NHS England, is slightly not aligned to supply chain, we need that voice back to say, actually, guys, do you mind having a conversation? Which one do you want first? Because you can't necessarily have everything. And then we work closely enough together to be able to overcome those kind of challenges. What we need is visibility of some of the conflict that we don't necessarily see. And that's one of the values of AXREM to us as an organisation.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the great things. We've got a sustainability special focus group, and we have the head of NHSE sustainability, the head of sustainability for NHS Supply Chain, and colleagues from the Design for Life team all sitting within that group. So we can give first-hand feedback from industry where, like we have some concerns about the Scope 3 emissions, because for some of our SMEs, that's a huge task, especially. So we obviously, as a trade association, want to offer our members as much support and information to walk them through that process so that they can meet those deadlines and they're not prohibited in any way from continuing to sell their products through supply chain. So, it's really important, those engagements. We talk now about AXREM members provide quite a lot of innovative products and services, but the landscape to bring these to market can sometimes be challenging. What is supply chain doing to ensure the NHS and patients have access to the very latest innovations? And I just want to kind of give some context behind that question. I'm contacted quite a lot by companies that are thinking of coming to do business in the UK. And I'll follow up with them 6 months later and say, do you want to become an AXREM member? And they've decided not to do business in the UK because they find it quite a complex landscape. So I just wondered if you guys were doing anything to make sure that NHS patients in the UK are getting the innovations that other patients around the world are privy to.
So there's two sides to this, and this is about how the system works together. There's an established pathway for innovative technologies through the NHS, which over time has become confusing. Over the last year, the teams within the innovation service, within NHS England, within the department ourselves, have been working to simplify how that works. And certainly whether we've got completely new and innovative products, how should they be considered? If we've got products that are established elsewhere but not utilised in the NHS, how should they be managed? And if we've got products that are being used in the NHS but need to be scaled, how should they be managed? So we consider different products at different parts of their life cycle and their impact on categories as a whole. And we've now decided how we want that to work across the NHS. So we recognise the challenge of innovation at all stages and the scaling of its use across the NHS more broadly. I think that's really positive. I think what's really important now is we see some product going through that cycle to understand how successful we're being in getting the mix right at the other end. I think some of the work that we've done around insights and sharing information with the NHS will improve over a period of time as well. I think our teams have a huge amount of knowledge about what the future will look like in different category areas and everything from sutures through to large diagnostics. There's a whole range of things that we've got insights into. And at the moment, I don't think we share enough of that with colleagues across the NHS. I think we've always been a little bit scared to take that kind of thought leadership position. And I think there are times now where we need to be completely agnostic to the supplier particularly, but talk about how the market will change over a period of time and provide those insights to the NHS to enable them to make decisions that are different than the ones they've always made before. It's really easy if you're working as part of a team who have always used a particular manufacturer product to say, look, it's going to be easiest to keep consistency across the range. Well, that's easiest if you don't understand what the benefits are of doing something else. And it's part of our job to articulate what are the benefits of having a variety of different equipment to undertake the services of a department rather than just having a consistent suite. I think the work that the suppliers have done over the last 2 or 3 years around the interface with the user of the equipment actually really helped some of that activity. Some of the use of machine learning and kind of artificial intelligence-ish, in the position of patients, making it easier and quicker for a clinician to line up to undertake a diagnostic activity, to extract the imaging and provide some of the guidance around where some of the high-risk areas may be in that image, are actually helping that interoperability between equipment. And as we've got radiologists and radiographers utilizing equipment and moving between hospitals or receiving images from a number of different hospitals, from a number of different manufacturers, piece of equipment, they're starting to identify, actually, what I want is the output. I think that's a really important topic, because that's what enables you to scale innovation quickly. That enables you to say, look, this is a new machine entering the marketplace. It might be different than the one you have, but it will deliver you a better output, therefore a better outcome, better patient experience, and a better quality of care in the long term. And it's how we turn the conversation from what's the easiest way of continuing to do what you've always done, to how do we ensure that the patient experience, the quality of care is appropriate, and how do we drive that through innovative new equipment. I think we've heard from government and from the department that a continued drive of diagnostics and early diagnosis is really important to managing that transition from having to deal with the challenges of poor health into identifying risks of poor health and dealing with them early. That will only come from having greater diagnostic capacity of the right type. And actually that type of diagnostic capacity might be different in the future than it has been in the past. Again, no point in scaling your old model if you want to move to a new one. So we have to manage all of those things. Our role in that is to provide the thought leadership and the insight to make sure that those people across all parts of government that need to make fantastic decisions have the information available to them to make fantastic decisions. It's not acceptable if we're happy to stand back and say, let someone else choose and we'll follow if we know something that would help them. It's our job as part of the team to do that.
And it's a difficult one, because actually, in some ways, the phrases innovation and value-based procurement get in the way of doing things, because it makes things sound bigger and more complex than they are. I've actually just left a conversation I was with my leadership teams before this, saying a lot of what we could do when we call innovation or that we put into a value-based procurement process is actually stuff we can just change and make a difference on. So we need to actually prioritize and identify things properly. And actually, we've implemented a new tool here to go to look at that and allow us to prioritize better. So there may be things we can do short term and the longer term. The other thing I've been struck by is where innovation comes from. So yes, as Andrew said, we've got a role in the middle to sort of facilitate it, but it comes from AXREM, the likes of organisations like yourself. It comes from suppliers. It comes from our own people view of the market, whatever they're seeing. But also it comes from the ICSs, the trusts, their approach by things. This is a joint responsibility. Yes, we're there to facilitate it and do it, but having that joint responsibility to bring it together, to prioritise and then look at what makes the difference. We are all about improving patient outcomes. We all know that, but that takes a lot of different guises itself, and it's bringing this together. I mean, again, having been involved in innovation for at least the last 15 years of my career, it's about how you prioritise, identify the value, and then grab the things that make the most difference and deal with those in that way. But also don't miss the really easy, low-hanging, and I said overused phrase, I should say this is a procurement person, we always say it, it's low-hanging fruit, right? There is some stuff you can still pick off that gets banded innovation or value-based procurement when it's just turn the dial a little bit, which we can do a lot more easily.
Yeah, and I think some of the reasons that companies that I've spoken to haven't come to the UK is out of your scope in terms of some of the uncertainty around regulation. And obviously with the MHRA fee consultation and things like that, I think once all that is wrapped up and we've got a much clearer direction, that will help with companies knowing their position of, wanting to come here to do business. In our strategic priorities, which I know you guys attended our launch back in September, we talk about influencing future healthcare. How are supply chain working with trade associations and companies to ensure we can influence this? And what impact can this have on early diagnosis and patient pathways and outcomes?
I think this is a a really important part. And we enjoyed the launch of your strategic priorities, and I think we welcome them more broadly, and it's consistent with the things we're looking to achieve. And there is fantastic alignment. I think we've got a number of jobs, and it comes to one, fundamentally, there is still a level of waste in the NHS, and we need to eliminate that by becoming more consistent, reducing unwarranted variability, and making sure that people are spending the money in all the right places. That will naturally create financial capacity, which we know is a challenge today, to spend money on the right things, become more proactive. So I think we've got a fiscal responsibility to make sure that every penny spent in the NHS is fantastic value for money, and therefore there is a breadth of investments the NHS can make and go faster by creating that financial capacity. I put that alongside our responsibilities we discussed earlier on around supply chain resilience, product safety, access to innovation, social value, sustainability, ethical procurement considerations, a whole host of other things that we need to make sure that we do once for the NHS to make sure that every part of the NHS is not trying to do it for itself, because all that duplication is effort that we don't need. We can act as one system working together. I think they are really important actions that we can take as part of the commercial transformation activity that we've already started with. I think some of our relationships working at the ICS level are really valuable as well. I think historically where we focused on trust relationships before the ICS was stood up means we can now start informing some of the longer term planning in the NHS. And our team that engage with trust to talk to them about their plans are really helping to drive challenge into kind of the historic thinking. We've got some amazing people across the NHS who want to focus on patient care. We've got others who want to focus on transforming the system and driving greater productivity and having access to new innovation. But make sure we have the right conversations with the right people. All of our colleagues are fantastic in the work that they do, but we've all got different tasks. I mean, it's important that we all play our own role really, really effectively. I think the final is we've established what we're calling our care pathway team for the first time, that are looking at not just whether the thing that we can provide to the system from a supplier is a good thing or a bad thing, but actually how would you use it? We're starting to having fantastic clinical conversations about how do you transform care by using innovative and new technologies. And some of them are not all about innovative and not all about new in all places. But how do we make sure we understand the impact on the entire patient pathway rather than just the particular small piece that equipment might relate to? And we've seen that through a whole host of different areas. By applying that mindset to system change, that's how we can create the capacity and productivity in the NHS that isn't just how do we make sure the money's available. So it's about having all of those conversations at the same time. All of them will create either the human capacity, which we don't have in the NHS today, or the financial capacity we don't have in the NHS today, to change the way care is delivered, provide more access to early diagnosis, provide more insights to expert clinicians who can make choices around how to care for people and deliver better patient outcomes. So everything we're doing is creating the capacity for the NHS to do the reform that is very, very key to do.
It links with the whole commercial strategy piece and how we're looking almost to turn how we look at the categories right now on its head and influence the first thought that we go when we're about to prepare to go to market with something. What are all the views we need? So the likes of AXREM, the suppliers can come in and give us that view then when we're starting out that thinking. So it's not just we need to buy this thing that we've always bought, how do we buy it better? It's actually, to Andrew's point, where is it used? How is it used? What's the future of it? Where's the innovation? What's the problem the suppliers face into? What the ICS is struggling with? And then we can overlay what the market's doing ourselves and that usual commercial expertise to get the right answer. The other thing in doing that, though, that's not just, we consult and then we give you an answer a time later. Actually, it's as we move through that journey to enacting the tender and coming out to market and launching the contract, actually, people will know along that thing what's actually coming. So when it's launched at the end, it's not a surprise. I don't do surprises. It's not my way. So it's kind of get everybody involved, bring everybody on the journey and deliver something that in the end, everybody wants and everybody knows about. And that will smoothen that whole process. But again, we're flipping it on its head, right? So I've talked about changing people. If you're changing that whole way of thinking as well and promoting it, again, it's a different way to do it. It's not undoable. It's just, we've just got to take time to do it properly.
Yeah, and I think industry understands their responsibility in the patient pathway as well. And we've got a Future Leaders Council who are currently scoping out the full stroke patient pathway and where our members touch that pathway and where our members could potentially provide efficiencies within that pathway. And we're going to use that as a template to then look at other diseases and health areas. So I think, again, that's where we, as a trade association, hopefully kind of set that best practice of understanding that we also have a role to play to help the NHS, to, shorten waiting lists, make sure the patients get the best experience and they're on the best pathways as well.
Yeah, so as you're aware, cybersecurity is very high on the AXREM agenda, and obviously it's a big issue for our members and partners. So what is Supply Chain doing around cybersecurity, and how could industry input into this work that you're doing?
So I think cybersecurity clearly is a priority for all of us. I think we recognise the impact of challenges to any type of security, particularly of our systems in a modern healthcare setting, will be a massive challenge. And we've seen that recently in a number of cases. I think we've put a couple of things that we have done and need to continue to do. So one, we focused on our own system. So we recognise that we have a critical role in the way the NHS works. And by bringing in Rachel Dean and her team, we've created a real focus in our organisation on managing our own risks, which is something we have to do corporately. And we have a responsibility to the rest of the system to do, but also then using that insight to support our supplier base. There are things that government have done through procurement policy notices, things like Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus, that we're having to work and explain to suppliers what they actually mean. Some of our suppliers are absolutely fantastic, and we know we've got a range of major corporates that have invested far more money than we've been able to over the last 10 years in ensuring that they've got well-protected, highly efficient systems. We've got other suppliers who've not really thought about this before. We have a role using our expertise and our thought leadership to be able to support them through our supply development team, and through Lindsay and team, we've got that activity stood up to better provide advice to suppliers and let them know what they need to do to be successful in supplying the NHS in future, but also supplying the rest of government in future. Part of our job is to translate that stuff. Part of our job is to be able to engage with suppliers who are saying, look, I could be really successful if I could overcome these 3 hurdles. What do you think I need to do to overcome the hurdles? I think as we move into the future with more digital diagnostics, it's more likely that those providers of traditional equipment are suddenly going to have to be able to plug that equipment into a whole host of other systems. That means a new capability has to come into those suppliers they've never been asked to do before. It goes back to the conversation we were having earlier. Working with a group of people, they've been asked to focus on make sure a product's available and make sure it's cost effective. Oh, and by the way, also make sure it's sustainable, make sure it's adaptable, make sure it's a broad challenge that all of us have to take on. And we don't want our smaller suppliers to have to spend a huge amount of money achieving the standard we're looking for. There's always a risk that they see these things, buy into it, and then overspend to try and get somewhere they don't need to be. Our job in articulating that simply to them is a really valuable one. We will start to do that through everything from our product information notices, through the tender processes, but also just through the general deployment of our supply development team to better offer that kind of advice. Rachel and her team are also looking at tender responses to make sure technically the things that suppliers have done to ensure that products and their organisations are resilient to cyber threats means actually we've got some really good smarts on it as well. That's something that, again, our job doing it once for the whole system to make sure that our suppliers don't have to do it every time they sell a piece of equipment into any trust.
I was going to say, don't get me started on DTAC, please.
Yeah, I'm going to say that's great to hear, actually, isn't it? Avoided duplication where we can would be amazing. So
we understand that working with the NHS can be really hard at times. And we've got a group of brilliant people in trust who are all trying to do their bit really, really well. And they've all got a responsibility to have a fantastic outcome. What we need to do is give them the comfort that there are things on their list that they must do that have already been done. And therefore we can do it once. They can rely on the information we provide them so you don't need to do it again. And that just comes with trust, comes with experience, comes with a bit of time, and that demonstration that actually we can work together as a team and be more successful as a team than we were as individuals. And again, I have no doubt teams do better than individuals do.
Well, on all those things, the way we structure how we approach the market can help SMEs and people at the other end, right? It's make both ends of the chain a lot simpler to transact and to work. Yeah, I think it just plays both ways, isn't it?
I think we very much welcome that, don't we?
Absolutely. We touched a little bit earlier on sustainability, and that's high on the NHS and AXREM members' agenda. So what is supply chain doing to ensure we reach net zero and we reach it together?
It's a very similar answer to the cybersecurity one, really. We consider sustainability to be that new kind of axis that we need to be able to manage effectively. Since 2022, we've stood up and deployed Heidi and her team to work with suppliers. Yeah, we've taken over a ton of plastics every year of the packaging of products that go into the NHS. We've taken over 5,000 tons of CO2 out by decisions we've made about how to work with suppliers in a different way. We're looking at everything within our own organisation to ensure that we can take lessons, and then the lessons we learn, we share with our suppliers. We know that the supply of goods, the manufacture of goods, the distribution of goods is a big part of the emissions and the impact in the environment that the NHS has. And therefore, again, we have that responsibility to be a leading voice. I'm really pleased that the team in NHS England, the team in supply chain work together incredibly well. And we recognise it's our responsibility to support suppliers through the sustainability work they need to do for the things we're responsible for. And that's everything from food, staplers, sutures and bandages, all the way up to major pieces of diagnostic and capital equipment that enable the NHS to be really efficient and really effective. Whether we're talking about sustainability, whether we're talking about cybersecurity, whether we're talking about modern slavery, all of these topics are ones that we can provide advice and support, as well as assurance and control over into the NHS. Getting that balance right is what we're focused on.
And it's really nice actually to hear you identify those challenges. And obviously you're so open for these conversations. So for us, that's really reassuring as well. And we do really welcome that and really appreciate that. So thank you.
There's a lot of power in suppliers also sharing, as they share what they're doing, allowing through like trade associations like yourself to sort of just share that, so everybody benefits from the process being made. But let's say this now, I hope it sounds right. It's not a competitive advantage. Everybody's got to do it. We've got to get there, right? This isn't an option. This is something we're going to do. The NHS has the long-term ambition to get to where it needs to be. Everybody's got to support it. So if somebody takes a step forward, it's no good having that step and hiding it. It's got to be shared. So again, part of what you do, part of what Lindsay and the SRM team do, is we've got to share this because it's making the path quicker and smoother. That's what will make a real difference.
Yeah, absolutely. We've all got to work together. So yeah, absolutely agree with that.
We always say in our sustainability group that there's no competitive advantage and we've all got to win this battle together. And again, that is one of the real advantages of a trade association, because in that group, we have some of our large members that have teams leading sustainability, mentoring some of our SMEs and working with them to help them reach those goals. So I think that is just super important. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
I was just reflecting on everything we've talked about. It's all about collaboration, right? And
absolutely.
Hopefully Andrew will agree. One of the reasons he hired me is I'm big on collaboration, and the power of working in any large organisation is really the sum of the parts. It's not any one area. You can be specialists, you can be experts, that's fine. But you've got to bring it all together, and that's really what we've got to do. So whether it's about patient outcomes, whether it's about sustainability, whether it's about value and driving as much as we can about that, whether it's about cybersecurity, if everybody collaborates on it, guess what? Get a lot quicker and in a lot better way than it would have been trying to pick stuff off individually. And that's the challenge. I mean, that's why Lindsay, and we've mentioned it a lot today, the SRM team is so pivotal. It's about bringing that together from a supplier point of view, from a trade association point of view. It's the whole thing. And then, as Andrew said about the ICS teams, in terms of bringing that view as well. And it is about that power of that collaboration.
Absolutely. And let's carry on having those conversations. So on to a bit of a lighter note now, my quirky question. If you could have any superpower, what would it be and why? And we'll go to Richard first.
I knew that was coming. I could see I was going to get picked on for that one. I'm actually, and this is going to make Andrew laugh, because there may be a video out there somewhere in the world of me driving a DeLorean from one of our events recently, from the Back to the Future. So I think my superpower would have been to go probably back to have that car and go back to the future. And that's not because I have regrets about the past, but you think, if I'd just done that little thing a bit different. Now, I'm also acutely aware of the butterfly effect that could have. That little thing might have a wide-ranging effect. So as I go through the thought process about whether this is a superpower or a pain, I'm not sure. But I think it's just, as you get older and you get more experience, just change that little thing, the difference I could have made. But then it plays into where I am now and go, sometimes it's just the little stuff. So as I've joined the organisation and tried to get people on board with where we're going, actually it's been the little stuff that really makes a difference to people.
I'm just really pleased you didn't suggest you wanted to go back 7 months and decide you weren't coming. That was my biggest hurry. I don't want to get back. I want to 7 months to convince myself not to do this. This is a bad idea.
So we need to find this photo, is what I take from that.
No, we don't need that photo. We do not need that photo there. Don't need that anywhere. No.
Where we go, we don't need roads.
Mine's a challenge. I think it would be one of speed. That there are so many fantastic things that we can achieve as we bring the whole of the NHS together. Our collective power is incredible. And through the collective change, we will make a massive difference. But there's a vast number of different organisations that are all moving at different speed. And our ability to engage with them consistently, have a truly consistent message, has to be limited, because you can't be everywhere all the time. So I'd love the ability to be able to get around listening to all our key stakeholders at the same time and explain why we want to do all the things we want to do and what the benefits are going to be for our patients, for our population, for our taxpayers, for our colleagues, and for the health of the system as a whole. Because by doing it together, we can do some absolutely incredible things. And I think there's always a risk that if you end up being 2 steps ahead, it doesn't work. That leading's about being a little bit ahead and then bringing everyone else with you. That ability to be connected would be fantastic. But we've got to recognise we can't be everywhere at the same time. We've got to be realistic about where we are, ambitious about where we want to be, and have a fantastic plan as to how we're going to get there. That's what we're principally focused on as an organisation.
And what a fantastic end to our collaboration podcast, because you've both mentioned that in your last couple of answers. So I think we found out lots about NHS Supply Chain today. And I'd like to say a big thank you to Andrew and Richard for being our guests for today. And thank you to all of our listeners.
This is the last episode in Series 4 Collaborations. Join Sally and I again later in the month when we will be speaking to colleagues at BMUS, the British Medical Ultrasound Society, about their annual scientific meeting in December. If you have enjoyed today's podcast, don't forget to hit subscribe or feel free to share the podcast with friends.